you get into that senior sort of developer role. And if you're not going to become the manager of the team, there's not a really good, obvious career path for you.
I see that all the time. Right. Where do you go?
Yeah. And so for them, they're starting to get bored because actually their job is getting, at that point, they kind of know it inside out, and it's relatively easy for them to keep delivering, but they're bored. And so working on a startup on the side is actually a way for them to sort of enrich their career and see new things, and then have that creative kind of satisfaction, but then at the same time not take the risk. Because of course there's plenty of folks that want to be full-time at the startup, but there's risk in being at a startup. And so there's a whole group of folks that don't want that piece.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and, of course, did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head. And this week, my guest is second-time guest, Praveen Ghanta. He was on episode 62 in the Practical Founders Podcast talking about his massive exit from his SaaS business in 2022. They used fractional senior developers for about half their team that were extremely productive and very efficient. Praveen created Fraction, his business that focuses on that, has over 500 vetted senior devs that help practical founders with acute challenges in their dev cycle for their short-term projects or long-term. He's a sponsor of the Practical Founders Podcast, and my guest today talking deeply about hiring fractional senior devs to help you move faster and more economically to create your valuable software company without VC funding. It's a great episode. Hey, Praveen, welcome back to the Practical Founders Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Greg.
Yeah. You were on episode 61. We're on 164 these days. So 100 founders and experts ago, when you told the story of HiddenLevers, your, second or third venture that was a huge success story. And today we're going to talk about Fraction, your latest venture helping practical founders, SaaS founders, software founders all over the U.S. with fractional talent of all types. And that's growing very quickly. Before we go back and tell the quick story of HiddenLevers for people who didn't hear that, what is Fraction these days, Praveen? It's growing fast, and I know it's evolving.
Yeah. So we like to think of Fraction as the solution for working with senior US-based talent that delivers really at a fraction of the cost. The quick backstory version, or we can jump into it further, is that we used this solution to build my last startup. And by the time we exited, 40% of our team was fractional. And these were folks. So I feel like when folks hear that term fractional, they think of like maybe a fractional C-level exec, maybe a CFO, CMO. But here we were using folks to be individual contributors. So whether that was writing lines of code, other things like marketing campaigns, that was how we were able to deliver efficiently. It raised our profit margins at that business quite a bit. We were actually saving about $1 million a year through the use of fractional talent. So that, was the genesis for the current business. We thought, how can we bring that to others? And so been working on Fraction for about 3 years. But I think the key takeaway is that we found this niche in the market where not fractional leaders, but fractional senior individual contributors, hands-on keyboard folks that get the work done, and then 100% US based, so there's no context switching for them. They understand the problem, they can get right in and go to work quickly.
Yeah, and the company you built before, HiddenLevers, you grew to about $8 million in revenue and sold it during the COVID boom time in the financial advisor space. It was a really cool product there, but you sold it for over $100 million, and you and your founder were profitable and the sole owners before that. So you supercharged your business using fractional talent, not just the C-levels.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was really a key part of our delivery. So starting almost from day one, there was myself and my co-founder. I was the technical co-founder, so there I was building this product that we were, marketing and selling to financial advisors. And there comes a point as you're growing where you can't do it all by yourself anymore. And that's when we had the thought we can't afford a full-time senior US engineer, and we don't have the time or wherewithal to manage an offshore team. because that takes, sort of additional management effort, and there's only two of us. So we thought, why don't we see if someone we know has some time available? That became that first fractional hire. It was literally someone we knew, but half time, about 20 hours a week, and they actually stayed with us for 9 years and delivered 25 software integrations. So they became sort of our integration specialists within our software, and that was a great success. So then we built on that, and we started hiring more folks as we grew. Now it wasn't like all of our team was fractional,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, but it was a way for us to hire senior folks that otherwise, you think about senior developers, even in
Oh,
today's
yeah.
market, 150, 200,000, maybe more
Yeah.
domestically. So it's expensive. And that's what we were able to do with this halftime model, able to bring them in at a level we could afford. And then we saw this really interesting benefit, which was that we were able to hire more junior in house and get some knowledge transfer with the seniors and the juniors as well.
Because it's an embedded part of your team. This isn't like fractional doesn't mean temporary. It means they have a full-time job. They want to work more hours. They got energy and time to go do this and space. Like half the people working in Silicon Valley are super smart and don't work 60 hours a week. So they want to work on something that's more fun, less
Mhm.
corporate. And they probably don't have to charge an arm and a leg either, to work on something fun.
Right. And it's been interesting to see how I would say the talent pool has evolved as well. We've seen
Yeah.
the rise as fractional work has become more understood over the last couple of years. We've seen some folks who are what I might call full-time fractional, meaning that they are taking on maybe a couple fractional contracts, and that's what they do. And then
Yeah, like
really
the
one of
consultants who say, "Instead of I'm unemployed, I'm fractional. I do 3 things
right.
for,
Yeah, yeah,
for
it's a
3
different form
companies
of
for a year."
consulting for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And maybe they find that more interesting, being able to touch multiple
Yeah.
different projects. The other really strong source of talent has been bootstrapping founders. So folks who might one day be part of the Practical Founders cohort, but they're really early stage, pre-revenue. So they're just trying to pay the bills, and maybe they're doing that half time and then putting all the rest of their time into their startup.
That's classic practical funding, right? Is don't quit
Yep.
your day job or keep something on the side or the consulting or services that got the business going. Gosh, that's really interesting. Tell us about Fraction. How big is the team and how many people in the, I don't know, do you call it a marketplace? You vetted, these senior devs and CTOs, and now you're on the growth side with marketing and growth marketing. How many people in your network or whatever you call it?
Right. So across the talent pool, around 500 folks today. So we've
Wow.
grown it quite a bit, over the last 3 years. Within that, the vast majority would be engineers, probably 80% engineers,
Yeah.
since that's where most of our demand is. When I say engineers, of course, that engineers, CTOs, and then across a range of skill sets, everything from the AI engineering that's in so much demand these days
Yep.
to traditional full stack development to DevOps, which as some of the companies start to scale and they get past 5
Yep.
million ARR, maybe getting toward 10 million ARR, you start to see those scale problems.
Classic
In
problems.
fact,
Yeah.
yeah, there was a vertical SaaS company that we're helping right now that they work with a very specific type of medical practice, audiology. And so it's a
Mm.
niche. And, they've gotten a lot of traction since most of these health tech startups aren't going after that specific niche, but they're running into scale issues. And so it
Yeah.
takes those DevOps engineers in this specific case to get into AWS or get into GCP, all of those kinds of platforms and figure out, okay, what's going on here and tune that up. So so those kind of
Yeah.
specialized skill sets that maybe you don't need that person full time, that's where we've seen a lot of impact as we've grown. But to answer your question, about 500 folks in the pool, about 100 or a little more than 100 working today. We kind
Yeah.
of grew really rapidly through the spring of this year and kind of got to that plateau or that kind of level of that 10 million ARR is sort of like the level that everybody likes to talk about in the SaaS world. And so we reached that level. Now, of course, in services, it's a little different in terms of gross margin and
Yeah.
all, but continue to progress the business
Yeah.
and see those opportunities.
Well, it's real and it's working. And several founders in the Practical Founder peer groups leveraged your talent. They said, "Oh crap, we're running into issues. I need a real CTO. I got to do something with my CTO.
Mhm.
I need a backup, and I need somebody who's been through the modern era at this size and scale to the
Yeah.
next level, and the people around him. And I know you were at our Practical Founders Summit. You've been a sponsor of Practical Founders, and people hear your little notes about Fraction on the
Hmm.
podcast here, and I really appreciate that. The Practical
Definitely.
Founders sponsors are not just people who can just pay for it; they're literally serious founders like yourself who've done it before, been on the podcast, and have a very specialized solution that is really serves the practical founder community. I'm sure you serve VC funded as well, but this is like a really acute need for bootstrappers who are scrapping with junior talent, or the senior person kind of built the first thing. And, now everything gets complicated and you get over 1 million or 3 million, and the scale issues
Right.
start to show up. So you've helped a lot of practical founders already. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Worked with firms in the pool. Thomas Brown over at eClaim comes to mind, and
Yeah.
another founder actually out of the Phoenix area that they would qualify for that Practical Founders label.
Oh, great.
There's a fellow by the name of Ahmad Salim, and then Brian Scruggs of ZyroTalk, and they recently
Yeah.
announced their acquisition. Actually,
Yes. I
um,
saw that.
yeah, which was really
Yeah.
cool. And yeah, so just to take that example, so we served them with a fractional CTO over the last year of their life as an independent company, and really helped them get ready for M&A. They had an
Yeah.
offshore team. Now, in their case, they had managed to scale and were growing successfully with the offshore team. Of course, with every you will find folks that are delivering successfully in the offshore model. Some folks are having struggles, but what they needed was someone who could come in and advise over the top. In their case, it was less making sure the offshore team was staying on track. They were doing okay with that, but more some of these sort of high level solutions as they were getting into enterprise deals and
Yes.
understanding that, and then also just even the communication.
Yeah.
Talking to those
Speaking
larger
the
clients,
language of business and technology and the organization on the dev side, it gets more
pulling that
complicated.
Yeah, pulling that together, and then finally when it came to M&A due diligence. So who is actually
Okay,
going to
right.
be your CTO in the room when that due diligence happens? And so that was, another capability that we were able to bring to the table with a great fractional CTO.
Yeah, and all those complexities you just mentioned are really important, right? If you screw them up, it really hurts the business and the value and so forth. So in that case, they could have, let's say, emailed friends that said, "Who do you know that's a fractional
Mhm.
CTO who could help?" But when they go to you, they can knock on your front door and you help them qualify the right kind of CTO for exactly what they need. They're probably a little confused about what that is, when they start. Do you work with them to, you know, clarify the role and find the right match out of your pool of people that are available?
We do. It's interesting because I guess coming from a SaaS background, we do have a marketplace style solution where folks can just go to the website. They can log in to the portal and actually look for talent on their own. But we do
Oh, great.
absolutely engage to that deeper level. It's worth noting that, everyone that is in our pool has been vetted, and that vetting, I'm still the final line, if you will, in terms of in person, or sorry, not in person, but rather, hands on coding
Yeah.
interviews and all that sort of thing. We actually ask that everyone, even at the CTO level or anywhere in our pool from an engineering perspective, is capable of doing the hands on work. So that means that they're going to be writing code
Yeah.
as we watch. By the
Thank
way,
you.
these days that means when I say writing code, what I really
Yeah.
mean there is orchestrating AI to help do that. But showing that they can use AI effectively and then also make the manual edits whenever it's going off the rails. So that's what we look for in today's world, because of course the world of software has changed, and you want to see folks that know how to use AI to accelerate, and that's really something that we've noticed. I would say it was this year. It was 2025 where the
Yeah.
explosion started and the world
Right.
changed. That acceleration is really happening. So you want folks that can bring that to the table while excluding those who are just using those tools exclusively, sort of throwing AI slop at the wall
Yes.
and
AI
not
slop.
able,
Right.
yeah, and not able to clean it up and ensure that that's what's really needed.
Well, you're a technical founder and a CTO coder type with a degree in computer science from MIT, and you've been around this game a long time, and you're vetting these founders there. So you're confirming that they're senior, you're confirming that they're hands on, and you're confirming that they can use AI in practical ways. to even multiply themselves. So not only are they senior, they're AI powered senior, right? That's amazing.
Absolutely. I would say that prior to this year, we started to notice, a smaller divergence, but we were seeing effective, folks who were using AI effectively in engineering,
Yeah.
maybe doubling their output. This year, it's really accelerated, and we're seeing that the combination of senior experience, which we define that as in a hard minimum of 7 years. The
Yeah.
majority of our pool is more like a dozen plus.
Yeah.
So folks who've really been in their career for a while. So that level of experience paired with AI works so much better because these
Oh
days
my
you've got
gosh.
these agents. I'm sure folks will have heard of like Claude Code and similar. You can let these AI agents rip on your code base and they will go and write a whole bunch of features. And the issue is actually what you want is you want somebody who can do code review and intelligently read the output to understand, okay, wait, where are the bugs here? Where are the issues? And what if this code is actually kind of maybe not pure nonsense because the AI's gotten good, but it's not appropriate for this case, or it's going to fall down if you scale it. All
Right.
those kinds of issues, you need to have been around the block a couple times to see those. And so that's where we see
Right.
the senior engineers coming in and leveraging these tools. So
Yeah.
4x is what we're seeing with the best folks. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, it's been a huge differential. One of the things that we
Is
started
that
to build.
4x what they were as seniors 2 years ago, or 4x what a junior is at at a full time salary or something like that?
So I would say that would be 4x the output of not a junior engineer, but of a mid-level to senior engineer who is not using AI and,
Old
not
fashioned.
using these modern practices. So yeah, it's been really an impressive leap.
Well, I think that's a sign for practical founders out there. We're doing it without funding, and funding for in the software biz these days isn't used to buy buildings or buy ads. It's used to buy team, right? And
Right.
if you can get the senior help you need to solve wicked problems twice as fast with AI help,
Mhm.
and you don't need them full time, it's a little bit like offshore discount, but like a multiplier of speed and savvy that comes into the business. Is it only for like complex acute problems, deep scaling issues, or needs to look at the whole code base or convert a legacy app or something like that? Is it really just for the wicked hard stuff, or that you need senior devs?
Well, I would say that that's an excellent use case, but really we've seen a benefit even, with the straightforward, I'll say straightforward, every SaaS. Well, part of the issue, in particular in vertical SaaS, when we get into
Yeah,
so many of the problems that the practical founders are solving,
yeah,
the issue is in the nuance and the understanding of the business requirements. So some of that being senior,
product side.
yeah, it's understanding the product side of the equation and melding that over. There are great offshore teams and nearshore teams and
Yeah,
maybe even junior developers who get how to deliver code these days, but if they're not putting that product hat on simultaneously, then you end up having to sort of spoon feed them. And that's actually the
yeah.
frustration that we start to see, with some of our clients that have, as they've gotten larger, do they really have the capacity to spoon feed each and every one of, say, a team of a half dozen developers? That's a lot of effort that goes in then to the product side of the equation. If you have somebody who is more senior and more of an independent thinker and someone who has perhaps built and delivered software, maybe even for their own startup in the past, well, then they've got a little bit more of that holistic thinking and they'll apply that directly to your business problem. So even if it's not like some super complex, super hard problem, well, there's the nuance of, if it's insurance, if it's healthcare and health tech, or if it's something finance related, or maybe it's just the idiosyncrasies of a particular type of e-commerce, whatever it may be, finding
Hmm.
someone who's been around the block in that before is huge.
Yeah. And I guess that would be your definition of senior. They can speak the business side language. They can do deep technical things, and they can work with team members productively, right? And get a lot of things done and do all that blocking and tackling stuff. About how much does let's focus on senior devs right now for acute problems. And I need to move fast. I need to get our new AI feature. I need to retool part of my app. I need to do all this stuff.
Mhm.
How much does one of these senior devs cost if they're two to $300,000 a year, in a big city, how much do they cost when you use them fractionally?
Well, actually, Greg, it's funny because coming from a SaaS background, we had decided that, hey, we'll have a public pricing page. Why would we do otherwise? Let's make this like SaaS. And so all of our pricing is public. But to answer your question,
At
with
fraction.work, let's just say people can
so
poke
yeah, if you
around and
just
see what the
go to
yeah.
fraction.work and hit pricing, and there you'll see it. And it varies by category, by discipline. But in terms of engineering talent, the two major areas, we're seeing full stack engineering, across a range of different technologies. So whatever technology
Oh, yes.
a team
Mhm.
is using, generally we've got that covered. And then there's sort of the AI engineering, which is probably the I guess the hotter skill set at the moment,
Yeah.
which comes with a little premium. But either way, starting around $5,000 a month enables, you know, access to these folks and then getting a really big chunk of their time. So, like half of their time, still possible in the 8,000 range where they're actually engaging by day. One of the things, actually, Greg, I should note that we noticed and we made a change in our model and we're able to make our
Mm.
pricing even more attractive was that both from the talent and the client side, the time of day matters. And so, for
Oh,
founders that really need that daytime access, then the
for the
prices, as I
meetings
was
and the Scrum meetings and everything. Yeah.
sure, let's say it's lots of meetings and they really want the person to be engaged with their team, by day. Maybe that's in the morning, maybe that's in the afternoon, but actually like a block of time. Then there's a little premium to that. So that's more like that,
Some
8,000-ish
fractional
number.
workers can do that, some don't, right?
Sure, yeah, some have things going on in the day, but if they're able to do that, so halftime at 8,000, which is, still not really there's no
Wow.
premium there relative to hiring that person directly if you sort of do the math. Uh,
Yeah.
But if they come in more off hours, where they're still going to be available for daytime meetings, it's not like they won't be available at all. Daytime meetings and a bit of Slack, but they're not available, for the whole chunk of the day, and they do the rest of the work off hours. Then we found that from a talent side, that their expectations were lower, and they could pass that along, and so we can come down to more like 6,500 in that range, and that's at halftime. Again, quarter time
For
being even
halftime.
lower.
Well, uh, I'm trying to keep founders off the funding drugs if they can, right? And I was in San Francisco last year for a conference and vertical founders were talking about funding. And I'm like, why did you do that? Well, we need to hire devs out here in Silicon Valley. I'm like, oh, like these $300,000 a year people, right? Or 200,000 or whatever. You can't get anybody for 100,000 there. So
Right.
this is like funding, giving senior talent to build a super team, right? With just what you need and just the language and just the timing and just the capacity and the budget. You don't need to raise funding if you can get senior talent like this. And I just been around the block so long in the software business, I would have killed for senior talent at reasonable prices that wanted to, work hard at a certain pace. So I'm sure they're pretty productive. What's the typical tenure for somebody who joins a team? Is it either it's a short-term project or they stay for years and don't see
Yeah,
much in
I,
between?
I would say that we've seen sort of a bifurcation. So to your point, there's sort of like the two cases. The long-term case, we've seen folks that have been engaged for multiple years, some of whom have been engaged. So Fraction's 3 years old, and so we do have some of these clients that are still working with the same folks, and it's been 2 years and 9 months. So essentially, from
Yeah.
close to our founding, and so that
Uh-huh.
just means it's an ongoing relationship where they're continuing to get value and keep keeping on delivering. And then we've seen other engagements where it's a little bit more project oriented. There's a certain chunk of work that needs to get done, and that tends to be more like 4 to 6 months. Um,
Yeah.
we go as short as 2 months on a minimum, but we typically see that like real value gets delivered somewhere in that 4 to 6 month range, or something quite meaty gets accomplished.
Oh, that's awesome. What is your ICP, right? You started helping your friends and doing this, and then you kind of took it to market and you started sorting. What does your ICP look like? Do they need a senior leader and they're looking for the next level down? They're used to having senior people around them and they can't find them
Mhm.
at the budget, or vice versa? What is the most typical best fit scenario that you're working with right now?
Right. It's been interesting, Greg, because it's almost full circle. We were analyzing this. It was earlier this. It was in the summer. We were analyzing all of our wins. Folks will do win
Yeah.
attribution and sort of client.
Yeah.
You'll review your sort of client base. And looking through that, the pattern that we saw is that the true ICP, where we've had success and where we think, where clients have engaged
Everybody
with long
wins,
term,
right? Hmm.
yeah, they're firms that are fairly similar to the firm that I built with the same model. So that would be, it's vertical SaaS, oftentimes not necessarily bootstrap, but I would say practical, because we see a different mindset with some VC, some heavily VC backed firms.
Ah,
We've worked with
right.
some of those firms, and many of
Yeah, if you're
them
not price
have,
sensitive, you might as well hire expensive people.
well, that, and then they've kind of got their 996 mentality. I don't know if you've heard about this, but the whole work
Yeah,
6 days a week, 12 hours a day. So out there in San Francisco, they're sort of like on that wavelength. And so
yeah.
there's a degree of impatience built within that, which, to be honest, is probably not as good a fit. If you're going to be sleeping in your office every night, then, that may or may not be compatible with folks that are working fractionally. So they're less so, but within the practical founder
Okay.
mindset, that's where we've seen, great ICP fit. So what I would say, so vertical SaaS, we've worked with early stage companies. We found that the fit isn't as strong there either, because quite often, like pre-revenue, founders don't even really know what they're building. And
Yeah, of
so
course.
they'll be changing the playbook every 5 days or 2 weeks or what they're
What we
building.
do.
And so that doesn't mesh quite as well. So post revenue, really 1 to 10 million ARR is where we've found, I would say, our sweet spot.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, and there's kind of a steady pace, right? They're not getting clobbered, the weekend and everything's a crisis, and it doesn't have to happen in a month. We're getting through the big stuff in a steady way and pacing ourselves. Budgets help you pace that way and all that. But gosh, almost all founders in the Practical Founders Peer Group growing up from 1 and 3 to 5, right? They had their plateau of some kind of scaling issue. The big seasonal push, that happened, and all of a sudden the software fell over, and it was a big fire drill or a conversion. Or do you ever help people get through legacy conversions? Right, we have verticals, very typical. We have a 10-year-old product, and
Yep.
either it needs help or it needs to shift to something more modern. Is that part of what you guys do,
Yeah, without a doubt,
or what your team does?
well, it's been an interesting overlap. I would say precisely because we're working with, very experienced folks. Well, that would imply that they've, like I was saying, been working 10,
I've been
12,
through it.
15 years, sometimes 20 plus. So they worked in those technologies earlier in their career quite often.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, so it, as a result, whether that's, say,
Ah,
moving from an older, say, kind of early version of Microsoft.NET to a modern Microsoft tech stack, or moving from, some legacy version of, in virtually every tech stack, whether it's Java or Python, even JavaScript, you'll find firms that are working on now deprecated or kind of no longer supported versions. And so having somebody who has built using those technologies, and then now they're coming back and able to bring it, up to modern standards, that's I wouldn't say that that's
I guess
necessarily the most common use case we see, but we do see it all the time.
I guess if they're senior enough, like if your company's big enough, you have legacy code, right? So, if you get to 10 billion, you got older code and older tools. And if you have senior devs who've been doing this 10 or 20 years, they've been speaking multiple languages for a long time. So they go back in time there. So is your model similar to like an Upwork, maybe with some hand holding and the vetting that's more, more boutique, hand holding concierge? Is it more like Upwork for these senior fractional people, or where you're looking, you find, you get help to find, and you're contracting through your company? So everybody's a contractor and you're still part of the relationship and supporting them.
Yeah, I would say, of course, there's similarities, but we kind of go a level beyond. So what we
Sure.
found, yeah, just from a delivery perspective, because Upwork, is absolutely that sort of pure marketplace, and
Yeah,
you can
very hands
go and
off and so forth. But this contractor coming through a system, right?
it is, in their case, I would say, you're reading reviews, you're trying to figure out. There's a lot. I would say that what we've seen in that world, the Upwork sort of world, is that there's a lot of race to the bottom going on.
Of
Whereas in
course.
our world, we're vetting the talent and ensuring the level of quality there. Only
Right.
working with senior, and again, only with U.S. based.
But it is a
folks. And so,
marketplace. They're not your employees, and they don't
but
become
absolutely,
your
still a
clients'
marketplace.
employees.
The
Yeah.
the overlay, and the value that we add on an ongoing basis, 'cause it's a fair question to ask. It's like, okay, you guys are middlemen. Like, what value do you really add? So there's the upfront value of the
Yeah.
vetting and finding good quality
Yeah.
people. But on an ongoing basis, what we realized is that bringing in a little bit of a light sort of project management layer adds value, and then also a little
Yeah.
bit of an engineering management. So having software architects from our side check in periodically and ensure that things are staying
Yeah.
on track. Those have been two pieces. Most recently, we started building a software platform internally, which we're now calling DevHawk. But why did we build this software? Well, we started to see, I guess, patterns. You work with 150 clients, and of course, you're going to see patterns
I'm
in
sure.
what works well, what doesn't. So what we started to see was ways that we could tell early signs of where something might be going south, and we might need to swap someone or recommend that, versus signs of success. So some of those are traditional metrics, like how quickly is work moving across the project management system. So say many of our clients use Jira, or they use another system like Linear, some of these project management
Yeah.
systems, and Monday.coms and ClickUps and all of those. But so they're managing tasks. So we can track productivity by
Yeah.
measuring, what's the velocity of the engineer in, moving tasks across the board, quite literally. Getting a little more granularly, we're actually measuring the difficulty of each of those tasks. So we're scoring them, because not all tasks are created equal. So that way
Yeah.
we can really measure the total kind of contribution and be able to see who's delivering there. And then the key insight for us, which we, now are automating, is communication is key. I think everybody knows that communication is key. But the question is always, well, but how do you measure that in any real way? Then what we realize with our software is that we can plug into Slack or Teams, whatever the client's using, and actually measure, of course, message frequency, but also response time and other critical stats like that, to see, is this person really engaging? And we view all of those as sort of like, if the level of engagement isn't there, then that's an early warning sign where we can intervene before the client, really starts to feel any burn, so that they don't have to.
This podcast is brought to you by my friends at Fraction. Are you stuck at your 7-figure ARR with tech challenges holding you back? Whether it's tech debt, slow feature delivery, or other scaling challenges, you're not alone. Every founder hits this wall. That's where Fraction comes in. Fraction gives you access to senior US-based engineers and CTOs without full-time costs or hiring risks. Fraction founder Praveen Ghanta is a practical founder himself, who has been on this podcast. He grew his bootstrapped SaaS business, HiddenLevers, with fractional talent and sold it for more than $100 million. Fraction's experts come in to fix problems and do real work, not just give advice. Fraction is flexible and founder-friendly. Get 10 to 30 hours per week from vetted and experienced US-based talent. And you could start with 1 week risk-free trial to test it out. Find your next fractional senior engineer or CTO at fraction.work. Now back to our podcast. Is that kind of solving a classic problem with business side founders and technical teams somewhere else, that they're always kind of skeptical that the devs are doing the work, and they hear stories about devs who work 3 hours a day? I certainly hear those stories,
Yeah.
in the Bay Area and
I
the
mean,
rest.
I think
And
inevitably
then
in the world of
they just would rather track the output like you can in sales. I mean, is this a little
Mhm.
bit closer to that, or what is the, what is the end state when this works?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because this is really a legacy of the move to remote work, and that it kind of happened all
Yeah,
of a sudden. I mean, let's say before 2020, there was remote work; it was less common, and then all of a sudden we had this huge shift, and it became very common.
yeah,
And so maybe some folks are using time trackers or something like that, which feel
uh-huh,
invasive from the talent perspective. But honestly, they're not telling you something valuable. They're telling you that the person stared at the screen for X hours a day. Did they really get
uh,
anything done? And so that's
yeah,
why the approach that we've taken to that is much more granular, actually measuring the output, which gets to the heart of the problem. Like, is something being done? Well, yes. And here's exactly those things. Taking it one step further, where we're going, by way of building a better business for Fraction and ensuring delivery, is, well, hey, we're in the age of AI, right? And so
Yeah.
what we're looking for our DevHawk system to be is really almost like an AI or agentic project manager. So of course it's looking at statistics first and seeing who's being productive. But the next step of that is, okay, send that person a Slack DM, talk to them about the tasks they're working on, actually getting involved a little bit. Because we found that from our side, even the best project managers can't stay on top of every last little thing.
Mm-hmm.
And human nature dictates that it gets a little bit frustrating if you have to ping if you as a human are pinging the same person again and again. And so something that can be automated and that we feel can what our hope is with that is that it's going to continue to raise productivity on our teams and ensure our delivery success. And then there comes a point, hey, we're internally using this software, we're dog fooding it, but Greg, I'd love to be back as a practical founder with a SaaS solution at some
Yeah,
point.
there you go. Right. Just like Matt Watson got in the, staff augmentation for engineers, and now he's building a handful of products. Can't resist getting back in the
Absolutely.
game there. And the whole dev world is changing. The world of work for developers. It's certainly true that it's really hard for a junior developer in the Bay Area to find a job there. And
Yeah.
I know it's affecting offshore developers, the big ones that we can see. AI is coming quickly. So a senior developer with AI is like got superpowers compared to a junior developer without it. There's remote work. There's all these other things going on, AI tooling in there. You know, is the whole dev game fundamentally shifting? And can you see where this is going?
I think yes, it is changing without a doubt. Like seeing the productivity and even seeing it myself in using these AI
Yes.
tools and being able to build faster. I did an experiment myself. This is actually early last year, so almost 18 months ago. And at that time, measuring my own productivity, I could see that AI was doubling that. And so that's an old number now. And you get into now with the agents being so much more effective. That's why I was saying going from 2x to
Okay.
4x
There you go. Okay.
is possible. So it's real. Again, we're seeing that does require the a level of seniority to be able to catch issues, as they arise. Because the challenge is that the junior developer can learn to prompt engineer pretty
Yeah.
quickly and get
Yeah.
some output, but they don't know what good looks like. And
Yeah.
so
That's the
it
irony. You got to be better than the AI to know if it's the right stuff that it's creating.
or actually, this is an example from earlier this week. I was literally dealing with a technical problem, and the AI can be prone to go down rabbit holes, in its thinking, and it
You
and it
think?
seems very confident as it's giving you answers. Oh, it's definitely this. And if you don't have the,
That sounds like
you know,
every engineer I know is very
right,
confident and going
and
down
so you
rabbit
don't
holes.
have the wisdom to sort of step back and say, okay, no, let's evaluate here and
Yeah.
try this other thing, and sort of take it stepwise. You might waste 3 hours with your AI tool and find yourself at zero productivity. And so we've seen that too. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why there's been all these studies coming out about like, oh, AI is not raising productivity that much. And it's precisely because you kind of need a very powerful tool in the right hands to get that productivity gain, to get a consistent productivity gain. And
And you see this multiplying. We can go out a couple years or whatever. It's going to be 8 times or whatever the
well,
number
yeah,
is.
I do think it's getting better. I think if so you asked me sort of that big picture view. What I think is
Yes.
happening is that we're simultaneously seeing the ability of teams, to produce more software faster. So the cost of software is coming down
Yep.
for practical founders, and that's helpful, right? In order for them to be able to
Again.
deliver
Mhm.
within their verticals, that's great news. It does mean that on the margin there are probably more competitors because it's just easier to stand up
That's
a company,
correct.
and so more folks are going to
Mhm.
get involved and attack all kinds of different problems. For software engineers or as an industry, so you kind of simultaneously have two different, you've got a shift in terms of supply of software growing. The sheer amount of software out there, I think, is going to multiply.
Oh my
At
gosh.
the same time, a lot of that is being written by AI, but as long as it's, say, 90% or 80%, whatever that fraction is, being written by AI, there's still going to be a valuable role for the humans to be involved. And here's the interesting statistic that I think is important, to understand from the engineering perspective. If you look at the number of hours per day, there's studies on this of how many hours does your average engineer spend per day or per week, actually, even say a 40-hour work week. writing code. And it turns out that it's usually less than 20% of their total time, because a lot of that time is in testing, review, understanding requirements, meetings, all the usual, aspects of work. And so, if AI perfects, say, that one piece, there's still a lot that goes into the job. Am I here to say that that there won't be less software developers in the future? There isn't some impact? No, I'm not here to say that. But I don't think that it's going to be. You won't need software engineers in 2 years. I actually do think that the
Yeah.
industry will continue to exist. Probably just a little bit of a. We had maybe an overshoot kind of in that post-pandemic era, and then we're having sort of a correction now, and then
Yeah.
it feels like we've been on a plateau since then.
Yeah. I think, there's no question serious software developers can do a lot more with the same amount of time. But that means that there's a lot of opportunity for code that wasn't written and, companies that haven't been started just because it was too costly. I mean, you go
Yeah,
back a decade and a decade and decade, it took a couple $1 million worth of software developers to build a V1, crappy MVP back in the day in the Windows world of anything serious. So it's really interesting. So most of your developer engineer types are full time and then want to work on, cool projects as a fractional part time worker. And does something happen if, the big companies shed their engineers? Maybe there's going to be a flood of senior engineers coming out and looking for
yeah.
fractional work.
We have seen, just given the trends out there. So we have seen a rise. I would say we've seen a rise in the quality of the talent available because there are more
There
folks
you
available
go.
on the margin. So that we're seeing. In terms of our talent pool, I would say it's still split between. I almost look at it in thirds. There's a third of folks that are full time employed that want to do fractional work on the side. Almost a
Uh-huh.
third of folks that are bootstrappers, and actually this is a side hustle for them, but it's a side hustle for them to the side of their startup. And then the last
Yeah.
third either don't want full-time work, they've got other life
Yes.
pursuits or things, and so they want part-time work only. And then folks that are doing it as they've got multiple fractional contracts and they're essentially a consultant.
Right. Well, I'm used to going back all these years. The best people didn't want to work for stupid companies. They went independent. The stars went out
Yeah.
of every agency and every team, and those are the ones you wanted to hire, but you couldn't hire them full time. So, you know, they became successful consultants. That you didn't have to hire the whole agency or
Hmm.
the whole company. So, I can totally see that, and they maintain some flexibility. They don't have to get back to indentured servitude. It's somebody else's venture and, taking stock. Do any of these fractional engineers, CTOs, do they ever take equity? There's incentives there or?
Yeah. It's interesting. So early on, when we were standing up the business, there was this question of, can we figure out equity as part of the construct? And the issue we ran into was sort of the gap between what the kind of senior talent wanted in terms of an equity share and what founders were willing to give up was just too wide. So we sort of
Another
set it
part of the
aside.
stalemate, why they can't hire them in the real world. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and so instead we stuck with the model that we have. What I would say though is that about 10% of the time, the client ends up being interested in making a full time offer, and
Oh,
so
there you
that's
go.
absolutely possible. Given our contracts and the way
Mhm.
that we're set up, and
Yeah.
so there's a placement fee involved, but that enables the client to
Yeah.
hire the talent and just move right on forward. So actually, that was something that we did, at my last company, had a lot of success with as well. That sort of, pre-fraction was this idea of fractional to full time. And so we see that within the business model today as well.
Uh-huh.
It's a
Right.
great path because
Traction first.
yeah, by the time you know that by the time you want them full time, you've already seen them work. So you already have proof. Contrast that with the typical full time hiring process. You do interview after interview, but at the end of the day, you're still rolling the dice when you give that full time offer out, and you're
Yes.
hoping that
Oh my gosh.
that was
So
the right one.
expensive. Right. So time consuming, so expensive. Can you give us an idea? So practical founders out there say, I like the economics. I like senior devs. They like the AI superpowers. I like how can order up somebody with specific skills when I run into acute problems. What does it look like on the other side of these? 400 plus on the technical side that are doing these things. Why would somebody who has a day job want to work 20 hours in something that isn't their day job? Like, are they the workaholics, or they're not really being fully employed, or they're bored at their big companies and want to work on something fun and new? Why
Mhm.
would somebody do that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all of the above. We definitely see so within the folks that are, full-time employed, maybe at a larger company or mid-sized company, I guess a kind of an archetype or persona would be senior engineer who isn't really management material, whether by their own
Oh,
interest or just in terms of their
yeah,
persona.
super
They
technical, right?
Yeah, they're just purely technical, and so quite a few companies, you get into that senior sort of developer role, and if you're not going to become the manager of the team, there's not a really good obvious
Yeah,
career path for you.
there you go. I hear that. I see that all the time. Right. Where do you
Right.
go? Yeah.
Yeah, and so for them, they're starting to get bored because actually their job is getting at that point they kind of know it inside out and it's relatively easy for them to keep delivering, but they're bored. And so
Yeah.
working on a startup on the side is actually a way for them to, you know, both for them to sort of enrich their career and see new things, and then and have that creative, kind of satisfaction.
Right.
And at the same
To make an
time,
impact, to see some work finally get through the
yeah, no,
system.
no,
Right.
all of the above, but then at the same time, not take the risk because, of course, there's plenty of folks that
Ah,
want to be full time at the startup, but there's risk in being at a
right.
startup, and so there's a whole group of folks that don't want that
I
piece.
totally see that.
And so typically, actually, speaking of that kind of fractional full time route, that's where typically, and it depends on the phase, on the stage of the company. But if equity were to be involved, it's at that moment,
Yeah, of course.
because when you're fractional, no, that's the just it's a pure cash, compensation, and then the carrot. If someone really believes, well, then equity ought to be, considered there.
Right. Well, you kind of said try before you buy for somebody hiring a senior dev. Somebody's expensive and really important and critical. Well, there's the other side there too,
Yeah,
which all these founders saying it's going to be amazing, it's going to be huge, and every developer has seen that. It says, maybe how about I try before I buy, and we'll see how this goes and see if you can make progress. If I could push the product forward, can you push the business forward? Does it
right.
always happen that way? So yeah, a lot of developers I know are the senior folks are very skeptical, right? They're screening just harder than the business owners are screening them, and I could totally relate to the risk thing. A lot of developers, big companies, are not like big betters. Quit your job, don't make any income for a couple of years, see if it works. They maybe know the odds better than the crazy entrepreneurs, but I can see that they wanna keep one hand in the fun stuff without having to bet it all.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, technical founders, those folks who choose to do that, of course, are coming from that entrepreneurial, risk-seeking mindset. But here we're talking about folks that have, you know, many of them have not chosen that path, and so
Yeah.
they're, you know, kind of getting their startup fix, if you will, by working with folks fractionally. And then you do have, like, as I mentioned, that you have these technical startup founders that are in our pool. In their case, they're actually doing the opposite. They are looking for a little bit of cash flow in a way that helps them support their dream.
Well, it's a very dynamic world that you're facilitating there for practical founders, and, I mean, that's the superpower. We'll do creative things. If people say, "I need $1,000,000 to start this business, and I have to raise funding," and the practical founders of the crowd are saying, "Well, no, you don't, and there's 100 ways to, you know, make some money while you're doing it and get into
Mhm.
revenue and get customer funding and, the revenue side and all of that." It's very creative there. I can imagine you're doing, really well. Do you have a big team yourself? Is it, a few of you, or I don't know how many people
Yeah,
on your team?
I suppose every company that can. I mean, not every company can eat their own dog food, so to speak, in terms of building their business. But certainly in our case, our team full time is about 9 folks, and then
Yeah.
fractionally is roughly the same. So almost 50% of
Okay.
our team, meaning
Yeah.
our internal team, is fractional, and then you have another 100 folks that are roughly that are working in the field out of that larger pool.
Wow. So not all senior developers, and you're the CTO or whatever here, are they doing all kinds of roles around the business, marketing
Uh,
and
inside the business, actually, the largest single role is our project managers. So we have a
ah,
team.
Makes
a
sense.
project manager because they're engaging with clients. And so that team, I think everyone except for my co-founder is fractional on that team, and she leads that team. And so we've got that group, but then we do have some fractional engineering talent that we use internally to build, as I was mentioning, the product DevHawk and other things that we're
Yeah.
working on. We have our talent portal, that clients can go in and actually see our talent. So all of those
Yeah.
things,
No, it's really
and
cool.
and we actually found some real lift in terms of helping automate the kind of the sales process. We have our proposal system we built in house, but it enabled us to actually just take a credit card to get started with a relationship, as opposed to doing the whole e-signature song and dance and all
Yeah.
of that. And we found that that was worth doing. So internal dev projects as well.
All right. Well, you're a practical founder yourself. I guess it's a little tech enabled there.
Hmm.
You would call Uber a software company these days. It's a marketplace and they
Yeah.
don't own the contractors and the cars, so forth. So this could scale up big. How big could this business get? I mean, there's tens of thousands of software companies growing and hundreds of thousands of senior developers and other fractional talent around there. Could this business be really big and scale
Yeah,
up?
I mean, hey, it's a question I asked myself at the outset, and as we were looking, to start the business. But just the round numbers, about 5 million folks involved in software development just in the United States alone.
Yeah.
So the fractional concept, of course, is a tiny percentage of that, but it's grown rapidly.
Yeah.
We had this
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
had this thesis back in 2022, and since then, the kind of fractional term has become normalized. It seems to be quite popular, say
Mhm.
on LinkedIn or
Everybody's
other places.
fractional. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of folks are embracing that term. So we've seen a lot of growth even within that submarket. And so, for us, say working with 100 folks, we see no reason why we can't be 10 times that size and still have just scratched the surface of the total market
I
size.
totally get it. Right. You mentioned the United States here. Your talent is in the United States. Why just the United States? I mean, other marketplaces have talent around the world. Is there something special about what customers are demanding and the senior talent or the time zone or some other, there's smart people everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and so what we call it is local context. And so certainly
Yeah.
in my own background experience, we had a lot of success with this, working with folks who were, in the US, but that local context for us, it just makes a lot of things easier. Of course, communication and time zone, all of that is easier. But then having someone, I mean, just to use sort of a prototypical example, who has experienced healthcare in the United States and the health
Yeah.
insurance system in the United States, if you happen to be working on a SaaS platform in health tech, then there's so much nuance that if you're
Yeah.
in Europe or in South Asia or East Asia, wherever it may be, or in Latin America, then you probably don't know, you've probably never experienced a copay exactly in the way that it's done here, or all of the sort of hijinks in just the way that one buys insurance or
That's one way to
uses
put it.
insurance or
Yeah.
deals with the doctor's offices. So all of that nuance, well, it's second nature to someone who's lived here. So we think that there's an advantage. And by the way, that's it's only US centric in that we are serving the US market. So if we were to be in the
Yeah. You can be,
UK, I would think that it would be local
Canadian
folks there.
centric or UK centric. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
Interesting.
so that's really where we see value there. And we have, perhaps as a result of that focus in our business, also seen our client base, in terms of dealing with sort of companies that are dealing with government contracts or anything federal or
Yeah.
anything sort of, defense. Or there's so many sort of businesses, actually healthcare as well as another one, where
Yeah.
for regulatory reasons, that may also be a value.
Right, and the offshore arbitrage game is universal. You're playing an onshore arbitrage game. That's really interesting.
Right.
That solves a
The
lot of
other
those
thing that's
problems.
been interesting as we've been able to measure it and measure outcomes in talking to some of, to companies, and actually even my last acquirer, because I was there and I was able to sort of see the data and see the data from offshore team productivity and all of that. What we've seen because of this acceleration happening with AI in the hands of the right senior engineers, we're actually seeing that the cost per unit of output can be lower onshore now with the right folks than it is with that offshore team. And that's a result of AI is sort of leveling that playing field because it's divorcing time and productivity a little bit. So that's been an interesting change to see as well.
That's interesting. Well, I totally see what you're doing here, and it's already been useful to a bunch of practical founders I know. So thanks for your help to help our serious founders grow valuable software companies without VC funding and all the creative ways that we do it and super savvy ways. Praveen, how can people reach Fraction? How can they reach you? They may be thinking, "Oh, shoot, I need to get into this. I've got to fund. I got some holes in my funding for my startup. I could do some work on the side, or I need talent on the
Mhm.
dev side or otherwise." How can they reach you?
Yeah, find us at fraction.work. So easy URL to remember. And then of course I'm on LinkedIn posting a fair bit there too. So you could
Yeah, you are
certainly,
posting. Thank you. Yeah, it's great.
yeah, find us there as well.
Okay. So I'm going to give you the mic here. What can you say to practical founders out there that are not digging around as deeply as you are this year in the dev side and AI and all the variations that you're seeing? What can you tell practical founders out there about what's happening now and where is it going that they probably haven't heard so much and as clearly? Yes, AI is coming. Yes, we know junior developers are struggling, and everything's moving faster. We'll have more competition. But what can you tell them about what you think is coming? Your Hidden Levers business was actually insights in
Yeah.
the changes in the economic world affecting the financial markets. What can you help them see the future?
So Greg, actually it's a timely question too, because I've kind of been putting some stuff out on LinkedIn this week about
Yes.
the topic of how SaaS pricing actually potentially gets impacted by AI. So I know a lot of founders, probably, I don't know if it's 80%, but somewhere close to that in terms of the percentage of our clients that are working with us on engineering that are building AI into their products, or that are, they're using our help to build AI into their products. So AI powered features. But the interesting thing when you get into AI powered features is that for many SaaS founders, for the first time, you've got this new cost, this new line item, which is how much do I have to pay OpenAI, or how much do I have to pay Google for Gemini, or whichever model
It's like a
they decide.
services margin. Yeah.
Yeah, so for the first time, because for the longest time with SaaS companies, you had your hosting costs, your AWS costs, but you could keep those relatively controlled, and you could have a pretty high confidence that you could stay at that 90% gross margin or maybe higher. Now, in the world of AI powered products, we're seeing a lot of companies that aren't careful about it. It could eat up as much as 30% of your margin. Those costs can spiral in a hurry if one isn't careful. In fact, I was talking to a client who got a sort of a shocking bill. And I guess I won't throw under the bus which AI provider it was, but they got a shocking bill from one of their providers, and it was $25,000, and it was or actually I think it was $46,000. It was 25 and 21, two invoices, barely a week
Boom, boom.
apart, when they had been using hundreds of dollars only before that, and so
Right.
this crazy spike, and well, that's a risk. It's something to be aware of. But bigger picture, forget about one-off spikes. Bigger picture, as you start to implement these features, which customers are clamoring for, understanding the impacts it might have on margins, understanding or starting to think about, like, okay, is there some aspect of usage-based pricing, or even can we flip the script and move a little bit toward outcome-based pricing? Because think about an
Yeah.
outcome. Well, in the business I used to run at Hidden Levers, the outcome that most financial advisors wanted when they used that system, they were actually using it to present to potential clients of their wealth management firm.
Here's what's
So
happening in the world. Here's how it affects your investments. Here's what we recommend.
all
Yeah.
of that, and what was their hope? Well, their hope was that having a good conversation, that client would sign on with them. So the actual outcome they were looking for was that bigger picture thing. And so we did traditional SaaS pricing, but I think we're starting to see a world in the AI, era. You get closer and closer to pricing on outcomes, or pricing aspects of your business on outcomes, because that can tie back to what the AI agent or the AI feature is actually able to
Yeah.
do.
Yes. Well, software just doesn't keep the records and help us organize workflows. It actually does things that that people used to do or didn't do
Yeah.
before, but now we have somebody to finally do it. I really appreciate that. Well, Praveen, it's always great to talk to you and learn about what you're doing and right on the front lines of a very interesting time. You and I are both at I'll just say old timers in the software business that are right there on the front lines of what's happening with AI in the modern world.
Yeah, no, great to kind of just chat through it further. It's changing every week.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on the Practical Founders podcast. Thanks for your sponsorship of the Practical Founders game and all the help you provide the founders that I know. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this week's interview on the Practical Founders podcast. Be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly in-depth interviews with serious software founders who are building valuable software companies without big funding. You can check out my blog, all the podcast episodes, and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com, or message me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. See you next week.